Hello boys and girls, this is Professor Nelson from Electronics. On this occasion, we are going to make an accessory for our multimeter, which will allow us to measure different components that our multimeter cannot measure. What components will we be able to measure? Well, components such as varistors, high brightness LED diodes, Zener diodes, diac, LED strips. The multimeter cannot measure all of these components. Therefore, we will make an accessory that allows us to give it that function so that it can measure different components that require higher voltage. Now, to be able to make this tool, we are going to need the following components or materials. How to be this module here is a voltage boost module based on the XL6009. This module can receive 3 volts, 4 volts, 5 volts, and raise it up to a maximum of approximately 40 volts. A battery that is not in use. I will use this one here since I am not using it at all. A battery charger. In this case, I will use this micro USB type. Keep in mind that the circuit will not use more than 10 milliamps, so this module is more than enough. Two connectors. We will use them for the multimeter tips, so we don't have to cut the multimeter cables. Lastly, we need a cabinet. The cabinet or box that we are going to use in this case is going to be that of a 12-volt adapter. Therefore, we will assemble the entire circuit in this cabinet. Well, without further ado, let's move on to the assembly. Very well. The first thing is going to be to remove all the components of the voltage adapter. The next thing is going to be to solder 2 cables to the positive and negative of the battery. Very well, we already have the positive and the negative. Now we are going to place it in the cabinet. We put a little glue on it. The battery is ready and glued. Now we are going to place the module. This one here. We are going to glue it on the battery. We are going to put a little glue and put it there. We are going to place the positive to the positive input that we have here, and the negative to the negative input. We are going to solder it that way. Now, as I mentioned, the negative to the negative, and the positive to the positive. But first, we are going to add two more cables, one negative and one positive. We are going to solder this to our charging module, to the negative, and to the positive. Well, we have already soldered the charger, the XL6009 module, and our battery. With the three components together now, we are going to see the voltage that we can obtain using the XL6009 module. We are going to regulate it until we have the voltage that we need to measure the components. But first we are going to solder a 4.7 kilo ohm resistor of 1/4 of a watt, or half a watt. We are going to solder it exactly on the positive output. We are going to solder a white wire on the negative. Well, then we have a positive output to the resistor, and the negative output to our cable. Let's move on to do the testing or calibration. And only then we are going to make the connections to the output points. Well guys, now we are going to raise the voltage that the module is giving us, which in this case is 15 volts from 4.2 volts of the battery. So we are going to increase it little by little. Okay, we'll leave it at 40 volts, which is enough for most of the components. Now don't forget that we have the positive output of the module to the resistor. The resistor end is going to be our positive for the components. The negative end of the module is going to be the negative for the components. You can change the resistor for a half watt one if you have one, and if space allows. Okay, now we move on to making the connections to the terminals or pins of the voltage adapter. And to the connectors for the tips of the multimeter. Very well, we are going to solder two cables to the output of the resistor. We do the same with the negative. Now we take a cable from each one. We have positive, and we have negative. We are going to solder this to the connectors. We are going to connect the negative to the black, and the positive to the red. We already have positive, and we already have negative. Now we have to do the same with these ends. Be careful with the pins, don't make them make contact with each other, since they could cause a short circuit. And if you can, disconnect the positive from the battery while you do the other soldering. Now you have to solder the cables exactly on the pins of the voltage adapter. You have to solder them there. The negative has to go on this side, and the positive on this side so that it matches the pins of the multimeter. Very well, We now have the positive and negative cables soldered to the adapter pins. Now for precaution, we are going to place a switch from the positive input to one of the switch pins. And we are going to place the switch output to the positive of the battery to cut off the power. Very well. With this, we will be able to turn it on and off. Just in case we left it off. Let's move on to the assembly in our cabinet, without forgetting that we have to make the holes for the charger, for the switch, and for the connectors. We have to make the holes so they can fit. Very well, we will make the holes. Ready, we already have the holes for the switch, for the two connectors, and for the charger. Well, now we move on to assemble our device. We are going to place the switch first. Now we are going to place the contacts. Remember that the switch must be off. There we would have the contacts for the tips of the multimeter. Now we are going to place our charger or module to charge the battery. We are going to place it, and we are going to stick it with silicone or with enough glue.
Lo colocamos aquí.
Okay, we wait for the glue to dry, and then we cover our measuring device. Okay, now that everything is in place, we can test our device with the multimeter. Okay, guys, now we're going to test our measuring instrument. We're going to connect it to our multimeter. We have to work with direct current voltage. The range can be 200 volts, or the range that allows measuring 40 volts. We put this directly on our multimeter. Remember that this side is positive, and this side is negative. We turn on the switch. We have 40 volts. Now we are going to put the tester tips. Well, now to test our device, we are going to use some components that are complicated to measure, as is the case with Zener diodes. Here I have a Zener diode which we are going to measure. Remember that Zener diodes are measured in reverse. The negative to the anode, and the cathode to positive. There you can see that it would be a 15-volt Zener. We invert it, and it shows 0.6 volts. Now if I short circuit, it shows 0. Don't worry, you will short circuit. Remember that we have a 4.7 kilo ohm resistor of 1/4 of a watt. And if possible, change that resistor for a 1/2 watt once so that it can last much longer. Here I have another Zener diode. Anode to negative, cathode to positive. This is a 4.7 volt Zener. Here I have a high brightness LED. We can see that it reads 2.5 volts and it shines quite well. I also have a varistor. This is a 22-volt varistor, and we will see what voltage it works at. 27 volts. This has no polarity, so it doesn't matter if you turn it around. It should measure almost the same. The varistor is in good condition. We can also measure the diax. Here I have a DIAC. The DIAC has no polarity, so there is no problem measuring it from one side or the other. We have 23 volts. We put it upside down. It reads the same. The DIAC is fine, just in case it is a DB3. We also have the common LEDs. Negative positive. 1.8 volts. It is in good condition. Now we can also measure the LED light bulbs. These ones here. If it is damaged, you can use this to check up to which part of the LEDs are fine. It is a 5-volt LED. It shows 10 volts, 15 volts, and this one does not work. This LED is damaged. "20 volts, 30 volts, and 36 volts. So with this instrument, with this one here, you can measure components that are very complicated to measure and do the tests. There you can see how the LEDs shine, and you can easily make the repairs more efficiently. Now let's move on to a little theory, for those who want to know how this device works. Very well, the theory is the following. First, we have a battery that gives us 4.2 volts. This voltage will go to the voltage booster based on the XL6009. This module here will give us up to 40 volts. Positive and negative. The positive will have a resistance of 4.7 kilo ohm. Be it 1/4 of a watt, or 1/2 a watt preferably. The resistance is for the following. First, if we place an LED diode here, a common LED diode. On the LED diode, there will be 2 volts. See, those 2 volts will be connected exactly to the terminals of the multimeter. Our multimeter will therefore always be measuring the voltage drop in the component. The rest of the voltage of the 40 volts will fall on the resistor. That is to say that in the resistor we will have 38 volts, and in the LED 2 volts. The current that will pass through the LED in this situation would be at least 8 milliamps. And the power that the resistor would have to withstand because of the current that passes through it, and the voltage that falls on it, well, it would be approximately 307 milliwatts. See that it is 307 milliwatts. This is greater than 1/4 of a watt, so it would be advisable to put a 1/2 watt one. Of course, this in this situation. However, there are different situations. In any case, it will only work for a few seconds. However, when you want to measure other components and we have our instrument, for example, a 15-volt Zener diode, on which 15 volts will remain, and on the resistor the rest of the 40 volts, which would be 25 volts. The current in this circuit would be at least 5.3 milliamps. Note that we are talking about fairly small currents. The power would be 133 milliwatts, meaning that in this situation the resistor can easily operate, since the power is less than 1/4 of a watt. However, in this situation is when our instrument suffers the most. So this is how our device works. It is not very complicated, even though in the video it may have looked a bit complicated. But this would be the theory and this would be the circuit so that you can guide yourself. Keep in mind that we have a switch right here. Where this cable was cut. So that is our switch to go from the battery to the module. This has to be there for safety, otherwise our battery will run out in a few hours. Well, without further ado, this would be the theory. If you have any questions, then please comment in the comments section. Well guys, that's all. And don't forget that if you like the video, a like helps the channel a lot. And thank you all for your support and for watching the videos. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.